And that night, they dreamed about what might happen to them if no holidaymakers came to Sodor. The engines were all very worried that they wouldn't be useful anymore. James was dreaming about the fairground. James dreamt that he was a coconut shy. Lots of children were lining up, and so was the Fat Controller. The children threw lots of balls at James, and one even knocked a coconut out of his funnel.
"I don't like this," groaned James. "I was much happier when I was a clean and shiny engine."
But it wasn't only James who was having a bad dream. Gordon was having a bad dream too. Gordon dreamt he was put in a playground. Children were swinging on him. They slid down his slide, and they climbed all over him. "The indignity," puffed Gordon. "I wish I was a proper engine again." Edward dreamt he was a scarecrow. He sat in a field, up to his axles in mud. And Farmer McColl didn't seem to care. But Percy had the worst dream of all. He dreamt he was a roller coaster ride. He rattled up the rickety rails and all the way down again.
"Bust my boiler!"
wailed Percy. As the dawn began to break, Thomas was dreaming too. In his dream, he was wondering how he could make things better. As he wondered, Thomas puffed along a misty mountain track. And there was Lady. Lady was a very special steam engine. She worked high up in the mountains. Lady was shunting trucks with Rusty the diesel engine. Thomas was surprised. "We always finish our jobs when we work together," puffed Lady. The next morning, when Thomas woke up, he knew exactly what to do. Thomas puffed across the island. He was looking for Mavis. Mavis wasn't like the other diesel engines. She was kind. Thomas knew she would help him with his plan. Thomas needs to find Mavis quickly, but he doesn't know where she is. How can Thomas find Mavis? Mavis's horn doesn't sound like anyone else's. Perhaps that will help Thomas to find her. Will you help Thomas listen for Mavis's horn? Thomas is wondering where to look first. Where does Mavis work? That's right, the quarry. Let's listen with Thomas and see if Mavis is here. Did that sound like Mavis's horn? No, that was a whistle. Percy's whistle. Thomas will have to look somewhere else. Perhaps Mavis is collecting something at Brendam Docks. Why don't you listen with Thomas again to see if she's here? Did that sound like Mavis's horn? You're right. It was a horn, but not Mavis's horn. It was Salty's horn. Thomas will have to look somewhere else. Maybe Mavis is having a washdown. Listen with Thomas. Did that sound like Mavis's horn? Yes, you're right. That did sound like Mavis's horn. But this doesn't look like Mavis. But only because she was covered in soap suds. Thomas has found Mavis, but he couldn't have done it without your help. Thomas told Mavis all about his plan. Thomas wanted the steam engines and the diesels to work together. Mavis agreed. It's the only way to get the airport open. But how will we get all of the engines to work together? Asked Thomas. First, we all need to talk to each other, said Mavis. Then Thomas had an idea. Let's have a big meeting with all of the engines at the coaling plant tomorrow, he puffed. Thomas and Mavis went to see the other engines to tell them all about the meeting. Thomas told Percy, then James, then Emily. Mavis told Diesel, then Harry, then Bert. Soon all of the engines on the island knew about the meeting. All of the engines except one. Thomas wanted to tell Diesel 10 about the meeting. But as he got closer and closer, Thomas got frightened and he puffed quickly away. He was sure Diesel 10 would never work with the Steamies anyway. Thomas had told the engines about the meeting, but it had taken a very long time. Thomas was too tired to go back to Emily's sheds. So that night, Thomas slept outside. He pulled slowly into a siding. The forest was dark, but Thomas's lantern shone brightly. Thomas wanted to tell someone about his adventures that day, but he only had an owl for company. Emily wondered where Thomas was. He must be staying with Percy, she puffed. Emily was pleased. She had the shed to herself again. But without Thomas, it seemed a little too quiet. She missed hearing all about the day. She even missed the sound of Thomas's sleep whistle. The next morning, all of the engines went to the coaling plant. Steamies and diesels came from all over the island. The coaling plant was very busy. The plant manager was surprised. Why are all the engines here at the same time? He wondered. So he went to telephone the Fat Controller. The Fat Controller was sitting down to eat his cream bun, but then the telephone rang. The plant manager told him all about the engines. I'll be there at once, said the Fat Controller. The engines were waiting to start the meeting, but Thomas was missing. I'm sure he will be here soon, said Mavis. Thomas was racing through the countryside. He puffed as fast as he could. But he had a long way to go. Must get to the coaling plant, must get to the coaling plant, panted Thomas. The diesel engines didn't want to wait for Thomas. Trust the Steamy to be late, grumbled Harry. This whole mess is the Steamy's fault, grouched Bert.
No, it's not,
Percy huffed crossly.
the diesel engine started it.
This made the diesels cross.
Maybe we should teach the Steamies a lesson,
said Harry. Thomas finally puffed into the coaling plant. He blew his whistle, and all of the engines went quiet. Steamies and diesels need to work together, chuffed Thomas.
We don't want to work with stinky Steamies,
oiled Diesel.
We don't want to work with dirty diesels either,
puffed James. If the airport doesn't open, it will be bad for all the engines, puffed Thomas. Both steam engines and diesel engines need passengers and freight to be useful. All of the engines agreed. They knew that Thomas was right, and they all wanted the airport to open. Then Harold the helicopter arrived. He had brought the Fat Controller to the coaling plant.
Why are you all here?
The Fat Controller asked. Thomas told the Fat Controller all about the meeting. We're going to work together, Puff Thomas, and get the airport open on time. The Fat Controller was delighted.